then Mike, still feel free to speak up.
So this is Answers in Genesis. This is is founded by Ken Ham and others. I don't know if you guys have realized, but we originally posted this saying we were exploring 8 fallacies or 10 fallacies. We reduced it to 8, and now we're actually only presenting 7. Some of them are just really silly, and so we tried to focus on the big ones. So the first one, why shouldn't Christians accept millions of years? In the Bible, it says the universe was made in 6 days, about 6,000 years ago at 4004 BC.
So for example, so these are statements that were made by Ken Ham in the video, and a little bit more information on Answers to Genesis. So it's actually quite a big organization, and it's basically fueling the New Age Christianity, and it's trying to answer a lot of questions in a more Gen Z savvy, New Age way of explaining things to continue brainwashing the modern youth, basically. So.
Yes, thank you, George.
I thought I'd add something just for fun. This calculation was done by Bishop Ussher. Some decades later, Bishop Lightfoot came in and calculated it more closely and announced that the first day of the week in which God created was 4004 BC on April 15th at about noon, whereupon some skeptic promptly tacked on, beyond this estimation, the cautious scholar shall not approach.
Is the concept of noon even a thing if there isn't even the sun to tell us what time of day it is?
Try having night without stars or a sun.
Yeah, I mean, like, everything is night, right? Oh, it's like there isn't even a universe. So, go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mike. You just gave away
Did they say which time zone? Because I would think that would be important.
Yeah, what time zone? Yeah. Correct.
Wasn't Eden in Mesopotamia?
Yeah, so you'll notice Mike just gave away one of my historical points. So thank you, Mike. No, that's okay.
Oh yeah, feel free to speak up. Yeah.
It's totally fine. Okay, this is based off of the genealogy of Adam to Noah and then Noah to Abraham. So they've added up a lot of years of all the people that have lived in the Bible from Adam to Abraham. The scientific millions of years model is not reliable. The biblical flood mixed up all the sediment layers. Therefore, the fossils are not in chronological order to provide evidence for the millions of years. The scientific millions of years model is based on an anti-biblical interpretation of the methods of dating the rocks. Scientists are sinful people because they are trying to interpret the world without God. It is far more rational to trust the Word of God, who created the world, knows its history perfectly, and has revealed sufficient information in the Bible for us to understand that history and the age of the creation. So I hope everybody is calm and not getting too high on their horse. But as George and I were going through this, it was really frustrating just to read their basis for their beliefs. So I am not going to counter-argue every one of these because a lot of these are just silly. So I chose...
The last point is explicitly given by the Answers in Genesis people.
Yeah, all of these are directly from their DVD. Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of have a little theory. That, the folks that can believe this kind of stuff probably don't have much of an education in science at all. Even or if they were forced to take a chemistry class in high school or something, they, maybe they passed with a C- or something.
Well, actually, these DVDs have pretty highly qualified people speaking for Ken Ham, an astrophysicist, microbiologist.
Might I say, probably the only microbiologist or astrophysicist who has that opinion.
Right.
I have to differ with you there. Back when I was married, I wound up with a degree in microbiology, immunology, and cancer biology. My ex-wife had a degree in nuclear physics, and we all figured we had to buy into this, so we did our best, and eventually it fell apart. That's
What do
my
you
true
mean? What do you
confession.
mean? Oh, that's a joke?
No.
What do you mean you? Oh, okay.
I was a
Okay.
Christian back then, and so was she. Well, yeah, kind of still is, but
Wow.
and we bought into it. I have a friend with a degree in molecular and cellular biology who is forcing himself to believe it.
Yeah. So, okay. You're in a position where you can't really think outside of the biblical box. So, yeah, you feel forced. Yeah.
And
I
Jeff,
didn't want to be a sinful scientist.
Right.
And Jeff, you were saying, the people that actually believe this. I think you're right. The people that this is targeted towards are, down south Southerners that, took chemistry once, and now we're 42 and don't really remember a lot about it. And then it's also a huge part of this is trying to get this information into the heads of the youth before they get to chemistry class or biology class, so that when the teacher says there was an original species of horse ancestor, and then that's branched off into zebra and our modern day horse and the giraffe, they will speak up and say, oh, I'm sorry, no, the giraffe just got its long neck because over its lifetime it kept stretching it to reach leaves. And so they'll already go into the science class with this information in their head. And I guess what I'm saying is they'll go in believing that this is all funky, that they're about to get caught, right?
So they try to teach the youth so they can counteract what they're hearing in the science classes.
Before they hear the actual logic.
Yeah. Okay, let me, I've tried to focus on the history a little bit here. So Aristotle thought the earth had existed eternally. Roman poet Lucretius, intellectual heir to the Greek atomists, believed its formation must have been relatively recent, given that there were no records going back beyond the Trojan War. The Talmudic rabbis and Martin Luther and others used the biblical account to extrapolate back from known history and came up with rather similar estimates for when the earth came into being. The most famous came in 1654, Mike, when Archbishop James Ussher of Ireland offered the date of 4004 BC. Within decades, observation began overtaking such thinking. So after these men, people started observing things instead of just thinking about things. So James Hutton in 1788 used observation to formulate a theory now known as uniformitarianism, which is the assumption that the same natural laws and processes that operate in our present-day scientific observations have always operated in the universe in the past and apply everywhere in the universe. In 1892, William Thomson had been made Lord Kelvin in appreciation of his many scientific accomplishments. Kelvin calculated the age of the Earth by using thermal gradients, and he arrived at an estimate of about 100 million years. He did not realize that the Earth mantle was convecting, and this invalidated his estimate. In 1898, Marie Curie discovered the phenomenon of radioactivity, in which unstable atoms lose energy or decay by emitting radiation in the form of particles or electromagnetic waves. By 1904, physicist Ernest Rutherford showed how this decay process could act as a clock for dating old rocks. Many geologists felt these new discoveries made radiometric dating so complicated as to be worthless. They had never cared for attempts by physicists to intrude in their domain and had successfully ignored them so far. It was not until 1926, when the National Academy of Sciences adopted the radiometric timescale, that we can regard the controversy as finally resolved. The constancy of radioactive decay rates could not be known until the development of modern quantum mechanics, and that these rates were fixed by the fundamental constants of physics. It was not until the 1950s that the age of It was not until the 1950s that the age of the universe was finally revised and put safely beyond the age of the Earth, which had at last reached its true age of 4.56 billion years. Physicists suddenly gained a new respect for geologists. Radiometric dating, or also known as absolute dating, continues to be the predominant way scientists date geologic timescales. Techniques for radioactive dating have been tested and fine-tuned on an ongoing basis since the 1960s. 40 or so different dating techniques have been utilized to date, working on a wide variety of materials. So not to get too deep into the chemistry of all of this, but just to show what is happening here with a lead atom. It starts out at 212 atomic weight, and then it goes down to 208. So this is what is happening when it is decaying. And the blue line is a graph showing the parent isotope, which would be the lead 212, slowly decaying. And then the daughter isotope is the 208 atomic weight lead that increases over time. So as you can see, there is what they call a half-life to the decay. And this graph helps scientists determine the age of something. There's many elements that are used in radioactive dating. So it's not just lead, but we have all these other elements. The carbon-14 is used for when living things die. And so that's a very small range, dating range. But the other ones go clear out to the age of the Earth, 4.6 billion years. So the Archean,
Cheryl, I can't hear you all of a sudden. Is it just me?
Mom, you just cut out.
Oh, maybe she can't hear us either.
Formation of continents and the beginning of life on Earth.
Hey, Mom, can you hear us?
Yes.
Can you start that statement over?
We had a period where we couldn't hear you, and it appeared that you couldn't hear us.
That happens to me every now and then, so I appreciate you stepping in. So the Archean eon is one of the 4 geologic eons of Earth's history, occurring 4,000 to 2,500 million years ago. During the Archean, the Earth's crust had cooled enough to allow the formation of continents and the beginning of life on Earth. Ancient Archean lead ores of galena have been used to date the formation of Earth, as these represent the earliest formed lead-only minerals on the planet and record the earliest homogeneous lead to lead isotope systems on the planet. These have returned age dates of 4.54 billion years with a precision of as little as 1% margin for error. Some meteorites are furthermore considered to represent the primitive material from which the accreting solar disk was formed. To date, these assumptions are supported by much more scientific observation and repeated isotopic dates, and it is certainly a more robust hypothesis than that which assumes a terrestrial rock has retained its original composition. So this is an element from Earth. But the best estimate for Earth's age is based on radiometric dating of fragments from the Canyon Diablo iron meteorite, which was not originally on Earth, but came from outer space. In the Beringer crater in Arizona, where the Canyon Diablo meteorite was found. An age of 4.55 billion years, very close to today's accepted age, was determined by Claire Cameron Patterson using uranium-lead isotope dating on several meteorites, including this Canyon Diablo meteorite, and it was published in 1956. So that's the end of that slide about why shouldn't Christians accept millions of years? So any comments on that? Okay.
Just so I don't spoil anything again, are you going to get to the are you going to get to the theory of changing speed of light?
That might be part of one of George's slides, and
Okay.
we may not have gotten to that detail, but you are more than welcome to add that. Yes.
I'll wait till you sort of get there, though.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Okay. Another one of their theories: was there really a Noah's Ark and flood? And doesn't the order of fossils in the rock record favor long ages? The fossils are proof of the flood, which killed almost everything alive at the time, and that's why there are so many fossils. The fossil record is the graveyard of the flood. We have proof of the flood because all the animals that exist today derived from two of their kind. Every dog-like animal derived from two dogs that were on Noah's boat. The scientific millions of years model is not reliable. The biblical flood mixed up all the sediment layers. Therefore, the fossils are not in chronological order to provide evidence for the millions of years. Other cultures have flood legends.
So they're using that as proof that there actually was a flood. They're looking at these other flood legends and stories about huge floods in other cultures, and they're saying, oh, that was the huge, that was Noah's Ark, and that was the huge flood around Noah's Ark. They just didn't call it that. And so they're taking that as proof.
Right. So I'm going to focus first on them talking about the fossils and how they're all mixed up. The challenge of determining the age of prehistoric artifacts and fossils is greatly aided by measuring certain radioactive isotopes. Until this century, relative dating versus absolute dating, which is the radiometric dating, relative dating was the only technique for identifying the age of a truly ancient object. By examining the object's relation to layers of deposits in the area, and by comparing the object to others found at the site, archaeologists can estimate when the object arrived at the site. Though still heavily used, relative dating is now augmented by several modern dating techniques. Radiocarbon dating involves determining the age of an ancient fossil or specimen by measuring its carbon-14 content. The carbon-14 method was developed by the American physicist Willard F. Libby at about 1946. It has proved to be a very versatile technique of dating fossils and archaeological specimens from 500 to about 50,000 years old. Now, I found a slide that really nicely describes what's going on with the radiocarbon dating. Corn plant absorbs carbon during photosynthesis, and then the turkey consumes the carbon when it eats the corn. The carbon is absorbed into all of its tissues, including its bones. The turkey is butchered, and one of its leg bones is fashioned into a bone awl. As soon as the turkey dies, the carbon it absorbed during its lifetime begins to decay at a known rate, releasing radioactive carbon-14 from all its tissues, including the bone awl. Archaeologist finds turkey bone awl during excavation. Radiocarbon laboratory measures how much carbon-14 is left in the bone awl to determine when the turkey died. At this moment, your body has a certain percentage of carbon-14 atoms in it, and all living plants and animals have the same percentage. As soon as a living organism dies, it stops taking in new carbon. The ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-14 at the moment of death is the same as every other living thing. But the carbon-14 decays and is not replaced. The carbon-14 decays with its half-life of about 5,700 years, while the amount of carbon-12 remains constant in the sample. By looking at the ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-14 in the sample and comparing it to the ratio in a living organism, it is possible to determine the age of a formerly living thing fairly precisely.
So just so I'm clear on that, it's carbon-12 that's absorbed and decays into carbon-14?
Yes.
The opposite. No,
Oh.
the opposite. 14 decays into 12.
Okay.
Right. Because
Releasing carbon, okay. So the carbon-14 is what's radioactive. That makes sense that the atomic number goes down.
right.
And then so when living organisms are absorbing carbon, they don't absorb any radioactive, or they don't absorb any carbon-12, but they only absorb carbon-14?
No, they absorb a percentage of carbon-12 and carbon-14, but there's very little carbon-14.
You mean 12?
No, 14.
There's very little carbon-14 because the most widely observed isotope of carbon is carbon-12. So there's trace amounts of carbon-14 in there.
You can think of it this way.
I mean,
The majority has to be carbon-12 or else we'd all be glowing.
Right.
Jeff, are you going to say something?
yeah, I was just going to say, if all living things contain a small amount of carbon-14, then everything we ingest will have a very small trace amount of carbon-14. So we would have to absorb some of that, I would think.
Yes. And so carbon-14 has a half-life of about 5,700 years, meaning that every 5,700 years or so, the object loses half of its carbon-14. Samples from the past 70,000 years made of wood, charcoal, peat, bone, antler, or one of many other carbonates may be dated using this technique. So this graph shows something has died and there's 100% of its portion of carbon-14 since it was living. So once it's died, that percentage goes down over time. And so that's how you can use this graph to date something.
How do we know that the amount of carbon-14 absorbed a millennia ago is similar to now?
There may have been fluctuations, but I think overall it's probably fairly consistent. But yes, I remember reading that in my research, that that is one of the things that could cause a little bit of fluctuation, plus or minus error in the date, yes.
The reason they know is that everything every carbon-based living thing in the world, we all have the same amount of carbon-14 relative to carbon-12. So if you start out, if your carbon-14 amount when you die is 100, then by the time you get down to 50, I know it's been 5,700 years since you died. So we're all going to have the same amount at the moment we die. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Okay. Now I wanted to go into their point of other cultures share legends of floods. So after refuting the possibility of a global flood, geologists dismissed suggestions that the story of Noah's flood might be rooted in some sort of fact. Then in 1993, oceanographers Bill Ryan and Walter Pittman of Columbia University used sonar to survey the floor of the Black Sea and found evidence supporting the story after all. Submerged beneath the surface were ancient stream beds, river-cut canyons, and shorelines. High-resolution seismic reflection profiles showed a former land surface buried in the seafloor sediments. Drill cores from the seafloor contained roots of shrubs covered by marine mud. Ryan and Pittman argued that over 7,000 years ago, the Mediterranean began to rise, breaching rocks along the Istanbul Strait, a waterway that helps form the boundary between Europe and Asia today. The event caused the Mediterranean to spill into the Black Sea, triggering a catastrophic flood. So you can see where Istanbul sits on the bottom left of the Black Sea, and you can see how that held out the Mediterranean Sea. And so they found evidence that the Mediterranean spilled over at Istanbul and actually flooded and created the Black Sea. Now you might say, well, this is proof of the biblical flood. Well, I think it could be proof of a local flood in that area where the Bible was originated. And if that area is all you know, then it probably felt like the whole world was flooded. So that story and that legend just kept being told. And I believe that there were probably other areas in the world that had local major catastrophic floods. And so either they heard the legend that started at the Black Sea, or they started their own story of a true flood in their local area. So I don't believe that this is proof of a worldwide flood, making the biblical flood account true. I just believe that it's a historical legend of possibly a true local event. Does anybody have any comments on that?
There is one other local flood event that would fit into that. Toward the end of the last great ice age, there was considerable flooding up in the region of what we now know as England there used to actually be a land bridge across from England to France, and that got completely washed out by some of that flooding.
Yeah, the melting during the Ice Age probably caused a lot of flooding. Okay, George, are you next? Yeah, you're
Yes,
next.
I am. Cool, Mom. I'm just going to say next.
Could I say,
And go ahead,
could I
Jeff.
say something? I didn't realize you were done with the Noah's Ark thing. So the Noah's Ark thing is another thing that I find highly improbable and moderately ridiculous is
Moderately
I've actually seen videos of the Noah's Ark, the full size Noah's Ark they have as a tourist attraction in I think it's Arkansas or somewhere. I saw
That
a video.
is from that is the museum that was made by Answers in Genesis.
Ah,
So
that makes
that
sense.
whole entire thing was conceptualized by Ken Ham and the
Yeah.
quote unquote Christian scientists that are on his team.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's a big boat. I don't know, 300 cubits by whatever. But even so, I mean, it's nowhere near enough to contain two of every animal on the planet. It's
And yeah, here's
not-
their point to back that up, to refute that, is that
they
in the
miniaturize
Bible,
the animals.
in the Bible, it is said, I've never read the Bible, so I couldn't quote exactly where it is, but it is said a statement about one of each, quote, kind, K-I-N-D, of each animal was put on the boat. One male, one female of each kind. And so they are claiming, Answers to Genesis is claiming, that means that back then there were only kinds. So there wasn't a coyote, there wasn't a fox, there wasn't a bulldog. There was just dogs, the dog kind. And so now they're claiming that that limits the amount of species that had to get on the boat. So it was actually a lot less animals than we might think. And so they're also claiming that in the 5,000, 4,000 years after the flood until present day, all those animals evolved into the species we have today that originate from that one dog kind. And so that same example is repeated with every other kind of species. So you'd have a mouse kind, and you'd have a cat kind that eventually evolved into a tiger, and then the normal house cat. Which is
Do they use the word evolve for that? Because I would imagine they try to avoid that word.
Yeah, I mean, well, you get what I'm saying, but yeah, probably
Yeah,
not.
I'm not sure what wording they used.
But I figure if a giraffe can stretch his neck in his own lifetime, shouldn't be hard to change things.
Right.
How long ago are they claiming that Noah's Ark happened? Was it 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago? Or
2000 BC, I think they feel that Noah lived.
Yeah, Noah's not that far down the genealogy, so if you do the overlaps for like the 900-year-old people, it comes out to Noah.
Yeah, they use I don't know. I mean, the canine genome is much more plastic than any of the other genomes. I mean, yeah, mankind has evolved several subspecies of canine over the past 300-400 years, and they use that example to try to justify, well, you know, we did the same thing with giraffes and lions or whatever. But you know, the canine genome is highly unusual in how plastic and adaptable it is. So that again is a misinterpretation, a misuse of science to try to prove a belief that, you know, really it takes millions of years for species to evolve. But yeah.
Right. Okay, George.
So Jeff, you're basically stating our entire thing about this whole presentation is that with these logical fallacies, they are not using scientific reasoning in the way that it should be used for it to work out properly. Yeah. Okay, Mom, I'm gonna say next, and then you just
Okay.
click the next button. Cool. So so each of these different ones that we're gonna be doing. So for example, this one, is there a God? Were different. I don't know if I call them episodes, but they were different chapters on the DVDs that we had. And there's three DVDs that came out over like a period of 3 years. But so we ended up cherry picking, just like people do with the Bible, different ones that were least silly and made most sense with this. So, is there really a God? Next one. Yeah. Okay. So so these are their points to say that there is really a God. Because we see complex design in nature, we have to conclude that there is intelligent design, and there is an intelligent designer. And so unlike what Mom was doing, I'm going to read one and then I'm going to give my points towards it, and then I'm going to read the next one. So over 3.7 billion times, I'm sorry. Right. Okay. So over 3.7 billion years, the complex design that we see in nature that they're talking about was perfected through natural selection. And so that explains the extreme complex design we have. If we go back to when they claim how long there's been life on Earth, so 6,000 years of there being life was very, very simplistic. It was maybe like just beginning to be multicellular life. And so if you were to look at it saying, okay, life has only been around for 6,000 years, then their point makes sense. But because we are aware that, and we proved in a sense through radiometric dating and carbon 14 and things like that, that the Earth is quite old and that there's been life on Earth for 3.7 billion years, then it makes a lot more sense that there's complex life. Next one. We have a Bible that tells us about God, and this Bible is unique in the world. So they're claiming that because their Bible is unique, which it's not, but because it is unique to them, they're claiming that what's in there must be true. So there's currently 300 plus holy books / religious texts, according to Wikipedia. And there are a lot of common tropes and patterns that we see in all of these holy books. So to claim that your holy book is especially unique or special because that's the only one that, to claim that it's unique and special and that it's the only one that's correct and factual, in my opinion, it's extremely biased and illogical.
Okay, if I can interject, not long ago, I was curious how much overlap there was between Christian apologetics and apologetics from other major religions. And I came across a Muslim website that tried to make the claim that the Quran was unique and therefore true. And one of the points claimed by the website that no one has ever been known to be bored when reading the Quran or hearing the Quran spoken. And I thought that was a
Well, I can
curious
tell you
claim.
that, yeah, and my mom can definitely confirm this, that Sunday, going to church every single week gets pretty boring, right, Mom?
Yeah.
Oh, I've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well, and to go off of what you were saying, John, with, I think it's really interesting too, where the common tropes in holy text, it's just like I don't know exactly what it's called, but there is a structure for making a story. And so, where, you have the introduction and the peak and the climax and then the resolution. But then even more complex than that, you have the hero going and trying to save something. And then they have a death in their family or something traumatic happens. They give them motivation to go do it. And then they meet somebody who is a huge rival to them. They have a big battle. And then they come out victorious. Or they come out not victorious, but then that gives them more motivation. And so you can see this in like anywhere from Harry Potter to Star Wars to the Bible, to where there's a common story arc, which makes a good story. And so when it comes to holy books, there's a very generic way to make a holy book. So
yeah.
Go ahead, Mom. Next. Or you go ahead, John.
I wonder how much of that was borrowed by, say, L. Ron Hubbard, writing Dianetics or whatever. I don't know anything about that particular.
Right.
It is time for me to sign off. So thank you for this. And sorry.
Yeah, nice having you on.
Okay, bye, John.
Thanks.
All
Bye.
right, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. If there was no God, there would be no laws of nature, because if it was a random universe, there would be no laws of nature. So what they're claiming here is that because there's so many different laws of nature that are complex and just seem to fit together and work, it must have been because of a God, especially if this is supposed to be a random universe. And so while they have a point, they also don't. Because, randomness, the whole point of randomness is it can cause and create a lot of complexity. And you see this if we're assuming that the multiverse theory is correct, that there's so many other universes out there that don't have the same laws of nature that we do. And so there's so much randomness out there that there's ones with a chaotic universe where nothing really works together. And so the only reason we're sitting here today talking about this and me giving this presentation is because out of the randomness, ours was perfect enough to harbor life. Go ahead, Mom. Or go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just thinking that when they say that, they're ignoring the entire science of chaos.
Right. Right. So the next point was, all people innately know the existence of God because he's placed that knowledge within all of us. And as being somebody who was raised without being taught religion, and was, I learned about religion on my own and then became atheist, I can claim, I can give my own evidence of my own experience that this is definitely not true. This statement's blatantly false. The phenomenon of people coming up with and or believing other religions that aren't Christianity or are polytheistic or atheist without the knowledge of Christianity or without the knowledge of the Christian Yahweh is very common. You can see in just Africa, for example, where they don't have Christianity and there's a lot of places that still believe the original ethnic religions with a lot of spirits and different things like that. there's probably at least 500 million people out there that have no idea that the Christian God exists or is even a thing. And so to claim that it's an innate thing to be aware isn't true. Go ahead, Mom. So if the Genesis creation story is not true, then neither is the rest of the Bible. And this is one of the things they actually said, to saying, well, you know, if the Genesis creation story is not true, well, then neither is the rest of the Bible, right? And that doesn't make sense. But me and my mom looked at each other and were like, they just gave away a huge, you know, crack in their idealism. It's a detrimental part of the Bible that has the ability to break Christians and their entire religious foundation. So I thought that was interesting to mention that, and I wanted to add that in. Go ahead, Mom. You can't prove or disprove the existence of God with science. The God is there. Well, they also can't prove the existence or non-existence of God with faith either. So that's where most religious debates end off. Where at the very end, they're like, one side says, the Christian side says, well, you can't prove that God doesn't exist with science. And the other side says, the atheist side says, well, you can't prove he exists either because faith is not a reliable source of evidence. Go ahead. So this is just a quote that I took out of the end of this one, which I thought was just ridiculous. If there is no creator, God, and if the Bible is not true, then nothing makes sense. Which, I mean, that one's kind of obvious. I don't need to explain that. So that's the end of this little chapter. If you guys want to speak up and discuss this, go ahead.
Well,
Please, someone speak.
I think I think it's really devastating for them if we prove there is no God, then their world falls apart. And that can really scare Christians, I think. Or if they feel like they don't have proof, they can't prove it either way. It's just really scary for them. So I can understand why they fight for it.
Right.
Okay, am I next?
Yeah,
Oh,
Go ahead,
go
Jeff.
ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I don't think people's beliefs are changed through reason. Only because that they believe in the things they do because of some benefit they get from the belief. If it's Christianity, maybe it's a community that they can belong to, or they can feel safe because their best friend is in control of everything. Is the most powerful being in the universe. And there's folks that don't believe in, say, global warming. Maybe it's just too scary a reality to believe in, and so they choose not to believe. Despite what 99.9 whatever % of the scientists in the world are saying, they're going to go, oh, no, that stuff's baloney. So I mean, certainly it is comforting to the psyche to believe that my future is secure, my children's future is secure, and the world is going to just go on being the way it is.
And there's nothing better than eternal life, am I right? So
Absolutely. Eternal life in a place that every need is met, and there's no suffering. And heck, I kind of like the Islam version of it. 21 virgins waiting for you, or whatever that is.
Heck yeah.
From a male point of view, that that ain't half bad. And it shows how
Will they
paternal
get
that religion is.
de-virginated at some point? Because it'd be boring to have virgins all the time.
You think after like at least hundreds of years, like maybe 200 years of having virgins, you'd be like, I want to get into like some older ladies,
Yeah, somebody with experience.
Right. I'm tired of having to teach these people.
Okay,
Yeah, I
I
want to
think
make love to
yeah.
someone who's not terrified. Yeah.
okay,
Right.
I think it's time to move on.
Robbie, I noticed you joined. Hello.
Oh, hi, Robbie.
Hello.
Are you enjoying this so far?
I just got on, so I'm still trying to kind of figure out what's going on.
Okay, cool. Well, feel
Sorry
free
about
to jump in whenever you want and speak like everybody else is.
Okay.
How recently did you join?
What's that?
How recently did you join? Like within a few minutes?
I think like 10 minutes ago I joined.
Okay, so I'll just give a little debrief. So this is all about an organization called Answers in Genesis, and it's about all the logical fallacies that they use to try to continue pushing the modern Christian idealism on the youth or impressionable older people too. So.
Okay, the next part is, did humans really evolve from ape-like creatures? Species like Australopithecus afarensis, or more commonly known as Lucy, have been upscaled to be human-like, but are really just a chimpanzee. Species like Homo neanderthalensis, or the Neanderthals, were downscaled to be inhuman or unhuman-like, but are really just human. Piltdown man, which is a false combination of orangutan jaw and human skull, they claim is another way to falsely create an ape man. So I really felt kind of sad that they talked down about Lucy and the Neanderthals. So I'm just going to give a little history on all the research and work that has gone into discovering those two species. After close examination of the fossils, the research team felt confident they were looking at the bones of a primate that walked upright. The fragmentary bones of Lucy's hind limb were sufficiently similar to the knee joint found in 1973 to support the hypothesis that she was a biped. Ultimately, evidence from other parts of Lucy's skeleton, such as her teeth and pelvis, demonstrated that she was, in fact, a hominin. Scientists no longer like to use the term missing link because it implies there is one ancestor that uniquely forms the bridge or link between our common ancestor with the African apes and ourselves. The chain of evolution is long and continuous, spanning millions of years, and is linked together by many different species. Finding and defining Australopithecus afarensis in the 1970s emphasized the fact that an ape-like ancestor is not instantaneously transformed into a human-like creature in one leap, but that different portions of the skeleton change at different times. So, while Australopithecus afarensis is not the missing link between apes and humans, it is one of the important evolutionary intermediaries between more ancient, more ape-like creatures and more recent, more modern human-like ancestors. Archaeological evidence shows that some Neanderthals looked after their sick and buried their dead, which suggests they were social and even compassionate beings. Neanderthals were actually very intelligent and accomplished humans. These were no ape men. So it's unfair to them that the word Neanderthal is used as an insult today. Neanderthals had stocky physiques with short lower legs and lower arms. The Spanish cave art indicates that Neanderthals were in fact capable of symbolic or artistic expression. Neanderthals also developed the ability to make fire from at least 200,000 years ago. They needed it to live in their very challenging environments. Current evidence from both fossils and DNA suggests that Neanderthal and modern human lineages separated at least 500,000 years ago. Some of us have inherited about 2% Neanderthal DNA.
I'd like to mention that thing of, we're all, or that Neanderthals and humans, or ancient humans, ended up mixing and breeding. I think it's just really cool. The fact that I'm not 100% original Homo sapien is just really cool to me. I'd like to add that while looking at the skeletons of these species, Neanderthal, they actually had larger brains than we did. Now, does that mean they were more intelligent than us? I don't know. Probably, actually. So this is one of the first, things that in my mind kind of pushed away the idea of even there being like, I don't know, God creating humans, right? The fact that we've discovered that there's other insanely similar species to humans that was intelligent, that had language, that maybe I could, go hang out with on a Saturday. And so I think it's just really cool. One thing is you can notice, I've noticed in some people, that if you've noticed somebody has a very large brow bone, that means that they have significantly more Neanderthal in them. There's a cool thing you can do. I don't know if you guys have heard 23andMe. And so that's where you spit in a little tube and send it off to a lab. They can tell you where your ancestors are from around the world. And say like you're half European, this is where you were from. Maybe you were like 2% African or something. But it also shows how much Neanderthal you are. So it's pretty cool.
It does. Wow, I didn't know that.
So I just really appreciate the fact that there was some other species out there that would have the same amount of consciousness that we did, and even more intellect.
Well, I think if you don't feel like you have to stay in this biblical framed box and you step outside of it, you can theorize and accept a lot of different things, as we're showing here, different species, and actually embrace it and think it's really cool. But as I said before, if you feel like you have to stay in that biblical box, then it's scary or it's disgusting to even think about this, being more ape-like. So, any other comments?
A couple. One is how much I hate those humanized museum displays of the old ancient people. But other than that, I don't know how many people know this, but the Neanderthal is actually considered a developmental dead end. There are some aspects of Neanderthal left in us, but for the most part, that subspecies died out. And what we commonly know as Cro-Magnon is like a different branch on the tree, which is where we come from.
Right, but and that's why it's like 1%, 2% Neanderthal DNA in us, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because there was I what was the wording you used? Because I know there is a subspecies of human that was before what we call our modern human, right?
Yeah, the Cro-Magnons.
Cro-Magnon Homo sapien. And so them and Neanderthalensis were next to each other and they lived at the same time. And so they kind of bred in, and then we actually kind of killed off what we could of the Neanderthals just through, the little wars that we had. And then remember, there was a lot of disease back then. And then, humans came into what we call modern humans.
Yeah, also the Cro-Magnons seem to be a little bit better at adaptability than the Neanderthals, particularly in tool making. Oh, are you getting back to Piltdown Man at some point?
Yes, I'm going to do that next.
Great.
And to your point, Mike, about, you don't really like the depiction of, what the museums have. I get that. But I do appreciate them creating something, a hypothesis, or this could be what they look like, may not really be what they looked like, but it makes it more real to the viewer. And I think that's at least a positive thing. They look like us, right? So let's try to understand them,
Yeah, it's just the differences that are lacking. If you went back one slide where you had 3 different transition, it's right over there on the right. Now you can see the differences. The one in the middle, which would be Neanderthal, has much higher shoulder bones.
Well, the one in the middle, I think, is Lucy.
No, the one on the right would be Lucy.
Oh, okay.
Pretty sure. Not totally, but I think so. But anyway, you can see those much higher clavicles. So in an animal like that, if you just look at Lucy right next to it in a museum, her shoulder slope looks like a modern person. If you look at those shoulder blades over here, you can tell she looked like somebody shrugging with a short neck.
Right.
So that's why I don't like the museum adaptations. They tend to look too human, I guess, is my problem.
Right. I can see that.
This is what happens when you show a biologist anything.
Okay. The Piltdown Man was a paleoanthropological fraud in which bone fragments were presented as the fossilized remains of a previously unknown early human. The falsity of the hoax was demonstrated in 1953. An extensive scientific review in 2016 established that amateur archaeologist Charles Dawson was its likely perpetrator. In 1912, Charles Dawson claimed that he had discovered the missing link between ape and man. In February 1912, Dawson contacted Arthur Smith Woodward, keeper of geology at the Natural History Museum, stating he had found a section of a human-like skull in Pleistocene gravel beds near Piltdown, East Essex. That summer, Dawson and Smith Woodward purportedly discovered more bones and artifacts at the site, which they connected to the same individual. These finds included a
I think you cut out on this again. We'll have to wait for it to come back.
No.
Hello?
The discovery was in, go ahead.
Did the rest of you lose her for about 30 seconds?
We lost you for about 15 seconds again, Mom.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, cut out.
These finds included a jawbone, more skull fragments, a set of teeth, and primitive tools. Smith Woodward reconstructed the skull fragments and hypothesized that they belonged to a human ancestor from 500,000 years ago. The discovery was announced at a Geological Society meeting and was given the Latin name Eoanthropos dawsoni, or Dawson's Dawn Man. The questionable significance of the assemblage remained the subject of considerable controversy until it was conclusively exposed in 1953 as a forgery. It was found to have consisted of the altered mandible and some teeth of an orangutan, deliberately combined with the cranium of a fully developed, though small-brained, modern human. The Piltdown hoax is prominent for two reasons: the attention it generated around the subject of human evolution, and the length of time, 41 years, that had elapsed from its alleged initial discovery to its definitive exposure as a composite forgery. So things like this, unfortunately, do happen in the science world throughout history. And, Christians or Ken Ham, they grab onto these things that make science look bad and unbelievable. And young kids can easily accept that. Any comments on that?
Well, yeah, to continue what you were just saying about, scientists grasping onto these little tidbits of where scientists messed up and using it as complete evidence, and their only evidence, that science is unreliable. And so if kids are taught this, and these are the only things kids are shown, then when they go into the school systems and or the real world as adults, maybe going to college, their brain is completely, or sorry, not the brain, their mentality is completely off-skewed into not trusting science, which I think is horrible.
The other comment that somebody made on this was, exactly who was it that exposed this again? Oh, right, other scientists.
Right, and so all science is discovering things, trying to make the most logical conclusion, and then if you find out later it's wrong, you update it, right? And that's happened many, many times throughout history,
Yeah, it's destroyed a few careers when they've deliberately falsified something. So scientists don't like fraud.
A good example is, Isaac Newton dropped a what was it, like a billiard ball and a feather, right, off the top of one of their buildings that they had around that time.
That's Galileo.
Okay, sorry. And it didn't fall at the same speed. We've all done this experiment. But then we went to space in the late 1900s, and 20th century. And so we did the same exact experiment, and you can see the video. The feather falls at the same speed as the ball, and so we updated our science, right?
And so you
Actually,
do have,
that was it.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, actually, the idea that the feather would fall at the same rate as a bowling ball in a essential vacuum like space was theorized a long, long time before we could go up there. So that was just like hey, we've got a chance to actually try this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, right. Yeah, thanks.
And there's examples of making mistakes in science, either by fraud, legitimately creating fraud or falsifying experiments. But then there are examples of, we just didn't know enough back then, and this is all we knew, and so this was what we thought. And as we learned more and had greater technology, telescopes versus just your eyeball, then you start modifying your beliefs, or the evidence shows more. So yeah. Okay, anything else on the Piltdown man? George, you're next.
Oh, am I? Okay, cool. Cool. So, does the Big Bang fit in with the Bible? So that was one of the things that I had. Okay. So the Big Bang can't be true because the Bible clearly states and defines that the universe was made in 6 24-hour days. Let me go back a little bit and just answer the question, does the Big Bang fit in with the Bible? The simple answer is no, right? It doesn't. And this statement, again, as I mentioned another statement before, does the same thing, but this statement usually ends most debates with between Christians and theists. You know, one side says Big Bang, and one side says Big Bang, and then, you know, you can't really go past that because the Christians bring up the fact that we weren't there to observe the Big Bang, so we can't really prove anything, which is kind of true, but also isn't, you know. So go ahead. The Bible also states that the earth was made before the stars, right? Because that makes sense. The earth was made on day 1, and the stars were made on day 4. I don't have anything to say about that. You know, let's just throw science out the window, you know. Go ahead, Mel. The Big Bang can't be true because it shows that the universe will end with a big freeze, and not the fiery reckoning that is stated in the Bible. So I'll talk about this a little bit. Recent information has surfaced, and the most, I'd say, up-to-date human knowledge we have at the moment is that the universe will end in ice instead of fire, which was previously thought, with the universe imploding on itself and things, you know, exploding, right, into maybe possibly a new Big Bang or whatnot. But because we've confirmed that the universe is expanding and exponentially, trillions, that's trillions, maybe even quadrillions of years from now, the universe will be so spread out that most light will not be visible from anywhere you are, unless you're right in front of a star. And at that point, that star will probably be a very compressed black dwarf star about to die out. And another quadrillion years from then, we will be really seeing the effect of radioactive decay of atoms, and how I won't go into a lot of the specifics, but eventually everything will break down. I know it's said, you know, matter can't be destroyed or created, but this is we're talking septillion years from now. So many zeros. And so at the end, all energy will eventually fizzle out. Everything will eventually have gotten sucked up by black holes. So all the light will have gotten sucked up by black holes, and we'll have an empty universe. And that's how the universe will actually spend most of its lifetime. A cold, empty void, basically. So it's what we call, quote unquote, the big freeze. So that's the complete opposite of what they're claiming the Bible's going to happen, right? The whole earth is going to be on fire,
as exciting,
right?
Not as exciting as eternal life.
No. Unless we at that point, maybe not humans, but another intelligent species out there will have figured out how to be completely electronic and not need sustenance, and will hop the little black dwarf stars as their only source of energy, and will have tapped in and found a way to harness dark energy or dark matter, and maybe we'll even we'll orbit around black holes, and somehow we'll be able to harness the energy of black holes. So who knows? Maybe there will be a life back then. I mean, not back then, in the future. So it's pretty cool. That's the end of this one. Would anybody
Any-
like to say
Any
something?
comments? Yeah.
Well, if you get eternal life, you'll get to see how it ends. So they'll figure out whose theory is true.
Right. Erica, you've been silent for a while. Are you still with us? Maybe she's not. It's okay. And if she is, Erica, I hope you're enjoying the presentation. Okay, Mom. I think it's your turn for the next one.
Okay. Did life come from outer space? Just because you find the building blocks of life in outer space doesn't mean that life exists or existed there. DNA as an information source must come from an intelligent God. Conditions outside of Earth are too harsh for life to exist. Directed panspermia is the belief that aliens bring life to Earth. That's illogical.
So again, these are the statements they're making in the video. So
Right.
they were saying, their whole thing was, maybe you're questioning, did the life come from outer space? Here's why not. And so there's claiming that there's people out there, which is true, that believe in directed panspermia, which is where aliens came and were the reason there's life on Earth. Which, I mean, just like flat earthers, they're in the minority, right? Really, nobody believes that. But it's frustrating because people are being given the information that this is what maybe scientists believe. And so they're sitting at home like, this is so dumb. Scientists, silly. And just like everything else, they're giving the idea to either children, teens, or impressionable adults that scientists can't be trusted and that they're not using logical reasoning, which is quite the opposite. Go ahead.
It seems very unlikely that God created any type of life in outer space, knowing that the only purpose of all living things was for the benefit of mankind here on Earth. Oh. Okay. I'm going to focus on the important things here.
Not the frustrating ones.
Yeah, not the frustrating things. The Murchison meteorite is one of the most studied of all meteorites due to its mass of over 220 pounds and the fact that it was an observed fall from space. It fell in Australia in 1969 near Murchison, Victoria. It belongs to a group of meteorites rich in organic compounds. Ever since the discovery of organic molecules in a meteorite that landed in Australia about a half a century ago, scientists have been tantalized by the possibility that the building blocks of life originated in space. New research is shedding light on how such compounds might have formed and found their way to Earth. Fred Ciesla, a planetary scientist at the University of Chicago, and Scott Sanford, a NASA astrophysicist, say our solar system was on the fast track to create life before Earth existed. The scientists made a computer model of the solar nebula, the disk of gas and dust from which the sun and planets formed 4.6 billion years ago. The primordial debris included icy grains containing frozen water, ammonia, and carbon dioxide, among other molecules. Ciesla and Sanford simulated the movements of 5,000 ice grains over 1 million years in the turbulence of the solar nebula, which tossed them about like laundry in a dryer, lofting some high enough so that they were being irradiated directly by the young sun. High-energy ultraviolet radiation broke molecular bonds, creating highly reactive atoms that were prone to recombine and form more stable and sometimes more complex compounds. Ciesla and Sanford say this process could have generated organic molecules such as amino acids, amphiphiles, and nucleobases, the building blocks of proteins, cell membranes, and RNA and DNA, respectively. Some of these organic molecules found their way to small rocky bodies, planetesimals, that littered the early solar system. Those, in turn, combined to form comets, asteroids, and planets, including ours. Thus, young Earth, Ciesla theorizes, was infused with organic molecules fabricated in space. Additional organic compounds, he suggests, could have formed later in Earth's primordial soup, or were delivered to our planet by comets and meteorites. An early example of the idea of directed panspermia dates to the early science fiction work Last and First Men by Olaf Stapledon, first published in 1930. It details the manner in which the last humans, upon discovering that the solar system will soon be destroyed, send microscopic seeds of a new humanity towards potentially habitable areas of the universe. In 1966, Shklovsky and Sagan speculated that life on Earth may have been seeded through directed panspermia by other civilizations. So the Christians are kind of laughing at the crazy idea that another civilization of aliens directed life to bombard into our Earth. But these are actual possibilities of life in various different forms could have been put into our Earth while it was being created, or we don't know if there are other civilizations out there that have sent life to Earth. We just don't know. So there are a lot of theories floating around, and I don't think we should laugh at anything.
And in my opinion, if you're a Christian who's laughing at that concept, which, I kind of get it, right? Sci-fi, silly, oh, no way that would happen. Then why the heck are you believing that a huge, possibly non-gender deity created everything in 6 days, which includes the kind of similar concept of aliens bringing down life to Earth? He designed every single life form that ever existed. Oh yeah, and he put it on the Earth.
It's like a supernatural panspermia.
Right. And so, like, if you're claiming that this is silly, have you seen yourself? You looked in the mirror recently?
So that's the last of that one. Any questions on that?
I was going to point out that this kind of idea has been actually posited by Francis Crick, who was one of the Nobel Prize winners who discovered the structure of DNA. But by and large, the rest of the scientific community said, oh, Francis, just shut up. So it's not very respected in the field. It's also notable that carbon-hydrogen atoms, like the ones you were showing before, are one of the lowest energy forms for carbon-hydrogen structures. So it's kind of natural for them to get together that way.
Okay. And George, I think you're going to close us out with the last one here.
I am. Real quick, anybody got anything else you wanted to say about any of the other topics we've been discussing? Speak up now, or ever hold your peace. We can talk afterwards, but I still have this paper in my hand with the stuff I'm about to say, so I might have a little bit of an answer for a question.
So we have about 20 minutes, which I think is enough time for this last bit of slides and maybe a little discussion.
No questions? Okay. Cool. So, does starlight prove how old the universe is? In their opinion, no. In my opinion, yeah, kind of yes, maybe. Go ahead, Mom. God could have created starlight in a supernatural way that does not abide to the laws of physics, they say. So they're out here going, you know, oh, okay, well, let me go a little ahead. So there's the main point is, oh, the Earth is really old. The universe must be old because it takes so long for light to travel to us, and the closest star to us is 4,000 light years away. And so, or the closest star observable, or sorry, the farthest star away observable with the naked eye is 4,000 light years away. So at least it's 4,000 years old. So that's the point they're trying to refute, saying that it's not going to prove that it's 4 billion years old. So yeah, like I was saying, the farthest star away from us, we can see with the unaided eye, is one called Cassiopeia, which is, like I said, 4,000 light years away. And then if you take into account that we have telescopes on Earth, not even considering like the Hubble telescope and how many stars they've seen, how far away it is, how many light years away it is. Considering that we have telescopes on Earth that can see stars up to 1 billion light years away. I didn't write down what the name of that star was, but I looked it up, and the farthest star we can see with telescopes that are located on Earth, we have currently, was 1 billion light years away. Then you can prove that the universe is at least 1 billion years old, correct? Because for people who don't understand, the concept of a light year is if you're going the speed of light, it takes you an entire year to go 1 light year. And so if we're able to observe a star's photons that are coming off of it that far away, that must mean that that light took 1 billion light years to get to us, which means that the universe has had to been around for at least 1 billion years, which completely throws the 6,000 years out of the window. Go ahead, Mom. The cosmic microwave background radiation that scientists have discovered shows a smooth, even radiation, and it shouldn't. So I don't 100% understand what they were trying to get at with this, but this was one of the points that they made. So I'll just explain the cosmic microwave background a little bit and how the statement "it's smooth and shouldn't" is a little bit wrong. So the Big Bang Theory predicts that the early universe was a very hot place, and that as it expands, the gas within it is cooling. Thus, the universe should be filled with radiation that is literally the remnant heat left over from the Big Bang, called cosmic microwave background. I'll refer to it as CMB. When proof of it was discovered, it became one of the biggest pieces of proof of the Big Bang. The CMB is actually not very smooth and uniform, unlike they might say here. And Mom, can you go to the next slide, please? So this is a very famous picture of the CMB. So the blue that we see, or the cooler parts of the CMB plasma, cool down enough to form subatomic particles and through gravity and constant collision of particles and matter, formed the first solar systems. So in these blue parts is where the first solar system formed. So yeah, that's basically it. We're about done with our presentation. If you guys would like to speak up, maybe bring up a logical fallacy that you've heard that we didn't discuss in this. We'd love to talk about it. And everybody can unmute themselves now. Maybe not Mike, I don't know. He doesn't have background noise, but hope you guys enjoyed this.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, George.
On the cosmic background radiation, it's smooth and it shouldn't be. Is that the creationist saying it shouldn't be?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So they're trying to point out how scientists are wrong with the discovery of the microwave background.
I'm just wondering why they say it shouldn't be, why the creationists say that. I'm not.
I think it's, one, they don't understand the concept of the CMB very well, but also they're thinking, okay, if there was a big bang, you'd think that eventually all the temperature would eventually get to around the same. And so we would look around the same temperature throughout the entire thing. That's what the faulty science that, and logic that they're going on.
Well, they're saying that that's what the scientists discovered, that it was smooth. We've got this smooth background that we discovered. But that's not what scientists discovered. They actually showed that they saw some pockets of cooling. And so it was not smooth and uniform.
Okay,
It was
scrap
actually
what I just said, yeah.
It was actually showing the beginning of the creation of the complexity of our universe. So yeah, they're just taking things out of context and saying things a little wrong.
Yeah, the cosmic background radiation, microwave background is one of those astrophysical phenomenon that I have not yet wrapped my head around. I know it proves the Big Bang, but I don't remember the whole argument.
Yeah, I'm hoping that this presentation helped atheists, non-believers to maybe have something to say when a Christian comes at you with some of these points that we've gone over. So we can speak a little more knowledgeably and rest in a lot of the work that scientists have done in the past. It's never been perfect, and it's always changing, but scientists have done a lot of work and we've come a long way, and there are a lot of things that we just don't question anymore, like the age of the earth. It's pretty well understood and accepted. So
I mean, you look at what the scientists have been saying about the coronavirus over the past several months, and there's people that believe what they say, they believe in science, and there's folks that just don't. And well, it's interesting to see what the outcome of that is. I mean, the rates of infection are really high in certain areas in the South and California. I mean, I think people tend to believe whatever authority is above them, and then the governor of California saying, "Hey, it's okay, we can open up now," was probably a pretty good mistake. But it's interesting how to see there are certain areas that might correspond to highly religious areas in the country where, you know, the infection rates were pretty high and still are pretty high. So, you know, faced with the reality of things, I think people might, you know, begin to listen to what the scientists have to say about the physical world they live in. And science can't be ignored. It's important what scientists have to say on many levels, on, you know, personal health and the health of the earth itself. So, you know, we'll see what happens.
And
The next year and a half, or I think both based off of what you were saying and just overall, I think the entire way that the world is going to function is just going to change dramatically. And, you know, the way we look at normal life, I think, is going to convert to a very unbelievable or abnormal way of life that maybe even 6 months ago, nobody would believe. I mean, if you showed Americans 6 months ago the map showing all of the different countries that Americans can't visit anymore, they'd be like, what the heck, what's going on? And so, I mean, this just came out of nowhere, and we're still trying to adapt. And there's a lot of people, like the people Jeff was talking about, they're going to take a really long time to adapt.
And unfortunately, some of the things that scientists have said, they've had to change and evolve with what they're discovering from day to day to day. And because this is something that's thrown on the science community so quickly, and it, you know, it's new, this is a real test for the science community. And, you know, there can be mistakes made along the way with what they think is going on. So that's
science,
just more,
right?
it's, yeah, that's just more for the non-believers, or, you know, the naysayers to latch onto, saying, well, they were wrong. Scientists were wrong in the beginning, and they changed their mind. Well, this is really tough. You know, science has to have time to analyze and research and discover and, you know, pivot. And so this is a really tough time, I think, for the science community.
Yeah. Well, everybody, thank you for coming and joining us. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Robbie. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Erica. And thanks to you, John, if you're still listening. Maybe you're listening to the recording back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, are you guys
George and
taking
Cheryl.
off now?
Probably, yeah. And Mom, that's probably where we would cut the recording.
Well, if anybody has any more to talk about, we've got a few more minutes.
Well, I was